So James, tell me about Bungie.
Yeah, so I moved over to Bungie earlier this year after doing 2 years at Wargaming. Bungie's at a really exciting time. Like I think we all know the pedigree of Bungie, having worked on Halo and Destiny and Destiny 2. Midway through last year, they split away from Activision to self-publish, and I joined Bungie to basically help them flesh out their self-publishing team around the world, and I focus on the APAC market. So that's every single country from New Zealand all the way to Asia. So it's a lot of fun. I get to operate in cool markets like Japan and Korea as well. I also still get to come home to Australia and kind of look after things in Australia. But I focus mostly on the PR, which is, I guess, has a couple of different definitions, commonly known as public relations. So that's dealing with journalists, dealing with media, producing public-facing communications. So like what you see on the website or social media, as well as things like influencer relations. So dealing with YouTubers and streamers, as well as community management and social media management.
Wow, that seems like quite a handful there.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of the companies kind of structure those sort of functions differently, and some companies might just call it a communications function. We call it a PR function. It's kind of like it's all the same thing. I really like it because you never get bored because you're always kind of working in different functions of like what you're doing. It's also changing very rapidly. Like social media is very challenging because you have to be on top of like industry trends. You have to be on top of like the data. Like it is very data driven. A lot of people think social media is like, oh, I'm just going to post some memes and like see how that goes. And like, cool, I got a couple of thousand likes. Well, that's great. Well, no, it's actually a lot of it is analyzing kind of what is trending and what isn't trending, and looking at like, okay, so people are liking these style of videos. How can I create more useful content like that? Or how can I use social media to help retention within the game? So like that could be creating a 90-second video on like how light level works in Destiny 2, or the difference between primary and secondary weapons and that sort of stuff. So it's not just a straight marketing tool. It can be used for retention and engagement as well of the game.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty impressive. So for those people who are watching through the stream, is like, you know, obviously you'd go to probably events maybe like PAX or something like that in Australia. What in Asia, you know, what sort of conventions or festivals they have that Bungie would be involved with typically?
Yeah, look, I mean, TGS I think is probably the one that most Australians will have heard of. That's Tokyo Game Show. There's also like a bunch of really large shows in Korea. Taipei Game Show in Taiwan is quite big. Thailand Game Show, EGS, which I can never remember what the name of it stands for, but it's basically the big show in the Philippines. Indonesia has a really good Comic Con that is quite big as well. I mean, the cool thing is like pop culture, video games is global. Like everybody, countries around the world all love similar things. I guess it's the way that they interact with them and kind of their expectations out of it is where it differs. So like those conventions definitely have local flavor. I think like one of the biggest things that when I moved to Asia and kind of started working in these markets is to realize that like whilst yes, we all love video games and we all kind of have similar interests in that regard, like the business nuances and the cultural nuances are very important. So localization is a really big thing, and that means everything from like translation of the audio to the game and subtitles to like what does the player see on the website and what does like the customer service journey look like should they have an issue. Like it's for us, it's really about making sure that we offer the same service and expectation of our to our players around the world as what they would get in, say, North America. The issue is, and the caveat to this is that it takes time to build these sort of functions out, right? Like we want to do things well, and I certainly don't like taking on too many things to the point where I need to rush it. So these sort of functions take time to build, and we'll get there. I mean, yeah, it's just you have to find the right people to help. You have to find build the right material, and like I'm a believer in you do it once and you do it right. So
yeah, and the expectations must be extremely high because you're talking about a name like Bungie that's so known.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Bungie's one of those video game developers that when they release a game, they really change the face of the industry. They've done multiple billion-dollar IPs. There's a lot of really good, clever people at Bungie. Like sometimes I feel like the dumbest person in the room. But I feel very lucky to be here. Like Destiny is an amazing IP. I think there's so many different Destiny is the sort of game that has something for everyone. Like it has the PvP component, the PvE component, the loot, hoarding, and that sort of stuff. Like it's not just like a straight multiplayer game. Like I don't know, like Counter-Strike, for an example, where it is like straight PvP. We have fans from all different kind of areas, and like one of the things that we've been trying to do recently is to engage with our kind of key fans, is bring developers into like a Skype call with them so that they can kind of hear straight from the horse's mouth per se, and like get a little bit more insights into why we do things. Because the thing I've done this in quite a few jobs now is like when you take fan feedback, like I can go onto Twitter and be like, all right guys, I need top 5 things that you want to change in the game that I'm working on at that time. And it's only like, yes, you'll get hit with like a couple of hundred or 1,000, depending on how big your following size is, like of pieces of feedback. It's not always like the most representative or accurate feedback. I mean, not everybody uses social media. Typically speaking, it is like a single-digit percentage base of a game that really actually take that next step to follow the brand on social media. So it's really about like, how do I marry this feedback up with the data from the game to be like, okay, I have a whole bunch of people complaining that, and like this is all hypothetical, by the way, like that the match time for this PvP mode is too short. But in reality, if I look at the game data, most of the games actually never even hit the time limit. So like, yes, there's a whole bunch of vocal people saying it's a problem, but like maybe the problem isn't so much in the time limit, it's how people are being taught to play that game mode, or how we kind of communicate that stuff. So a lot of stuff these days is increasingly becoming more data driven as well. Like, yes, there is a strong focus on like core communication, and that is 100% like it is how well can you really communicate with people, but you then have to be able to take that feedback and compare it to what's actually going on.
So with like, obviously by doing all that sort of thing, that's why I think you can see that you have a very strong brand loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bungie really do believe in putting players first and listening to players. We don't always like enact the feedback. Like it's very like let me put it this way: it is very difficult to take fan feedback and enact it quickly. Like anyone who's done any programming knows this stuff takes time. Destiny 2 rather is a game that has literally hundreds of people working on it, and kind of all these different sub teams. So it does take a long time to be able to make those changes, because like what you're seeing in the game today is probably a decision made back last year or even possibly the year before, right? I mean, I kind of think back to, and this is probably going to date me a little bit, like watching TV shows in the 90s, especially in Australia, when we would get them probably 3 to 6 months later than like either the US or the UK. And you'd be like, oh man, like I wish they just changed this. And then you realize that like, oh, this is actually shot like a year and a half ago. So of course that section of it's going to be completely out of date. So yeah. But no, like it's cool. Like it's exciting. I think video games are such in the back end, they really are complicated beasts that I'm not even going to pretend that I fully understand it. Like I work in the publishing function, so I'm not a core developer, right? But I know enough about it to know just how complicated it is, and understand some of the principles of it. And I think I guess it's like, as you start to understand how a car works, like you see that there are very few parts that sit independent of themselves. It's like, I don't know, like let's take the brake system as an example. It's not just like you press that thing and all of a sudden the wheels stop. You press the brake, that pulls a lever, which sends a message down through the computer into the chassis, or not into the chassis, but into like the cables that run through the chassis, which will be around the CV joint and all that sort of stuff. I've probably just pissed a whole bunch of car people off by getting my car anatomy wrong. But the point I'm trying to make is like what seems like a simple thing of just pressing a button and it's stopping is actually like quite a complicated process. And especially when you add in like a network environment, like running a live game, it becomes infinitely more complicated.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was going to ask you is like, when you were 15, 14 or 15, could you imagine where you are now?
No. I mean, I don't know. Like I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I mean, I guess the funny thing about ending up at Bungie was, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching this live stream and who come to your events are a lot younger, probably take online gaming for granted. But when I was 15, Xbox Live and PlayStation Network were in the very, very, very early days. And in fact, one of my best friends from high school, he got the first Xbox on launch and got Halo. And I never had an Xbox. I was always a PlayStation guy, but I was so intrigued by the fact that you could take Halo online that I invited him over one night for a sleepover just to get his Xbox and be able to plug it into the internet and see how it worked and like kind of experience this online gaming stuff. I still haven't told him told him about that to this day, but I probably owe it to him at some point. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, if I'm really honest with you, my plan in high school was to join the police force because it just seemed like a good way to get life experience. And then I was very fortunate enough to, I actually started my career with a website called GameSpot, and I happened to run a very large, GameSpot was very progressive back in the day. Like, it was one of the very first websites to have live video. Again, it's something that everybody takes for granted these days. And as well as like a very fleshed out and functional forum and community capability. And I built out the very first, or actually, no, it was the first. It was the first and the largest Australian group on Facebook. I'm pretty sure, funnily enough, the other Australian group, the very first and largest group on GameSpot for Australians. And I'm pretty sure that the second largest group was actually run by a mate of yours, Jason O'Callaghan.
Yeah.
And then eventually merged the two because it was like there wasn't enough Australians on GameSpot to justify having the two groups. And then it was around that time that GameSpot were localizing the website and they were looking for someone to come on board and help them like ease the community into the fact that the website would be changing. But also help them set up like local ratings, local release dates, and that sort of like, again, all stuff that people take for granted. But literally my very first job in video games was asking publishers for their release schedules for the remainder of the year and going through and manually updating box art, classification ratings, and release dates. It was extremely tedious. About 3 days into it, I'm like, oh man, I've got to get out. Like, I need to figure out how to move up from this. But yeah, and I was lucky enough to kind of start writing and I guess was trained as a journalist and then decided to jump over into PR and marketing from there.
It's an amazing journey. So, coming from Oz and now you're over in Singapore and, you've made a life for yourself over there doing all those sort of things. So, do you actually ever have was there ever a point where you went, oh, I'm actually part of the industry? Like you didn't think that you were kind of catching up. Some people I talk to when they're developing things or they produce something and they go, oh, I don't feel like I'm part of it, but everyone else is going, hang on, you're part of the industry, or, yes, you're doing it. Did you ever have a time where you kind of went, oh, I'm part of the industry, and, you thought of, I've taken this a little bit seriously now. Like you have an understanding as opposed to just kind of think you're still catching up.
It's funny. Like I guess, but I wouldn't say. I mean, you're always learning, right? Like there's always, especially in video games, like it is such a technologically driven industry that things are always changing, things are always developing and evolving, right? So I think there is always a degree of like, you never stop learning. And if you stop learning in a job, and I think this goes for any job, if you stop learning and you stop developing, you need to leave that job and find another job.
Yep.
But Do I feel like I'm a part of the industry? Like, I don't know.
Was it like
It's a
the
funny.
first, yeah, the first time you actually felt it, you know, that you, or you kind of woke up, wow, I'm doing this. You know, it's like it really dawned on you.
I think there's definitely things in my career where I've been like, holy shit, like this is really, sorry, I don't know how to say that. I think this is really cool. My first E3 was like fantastic. And I still love E3 to this day. Like I know a lot of people find it very tiring, but I love it. Like it's a very rewarding and satisfying week.
Mm.
Same with Tokyo Game Show. And I mean, getting to meet cool people, like meeting developers. I was fortunate enough many years ago to work on Lawbreakers, which was Cliff Blazinski. He's the guy who did Gears of War, his game, and I got to spend a lot of time with Cliff and help flesh out, I guess, the global messaging and global strategy for that, which was kind of cool. But I don't know, like there's still times where like it's not that I feel like a cog, but I don't know, like I do my job and I contribute. Like it's I've had a few friends who are like, oh my God, like that's so cool what you do. And like I don't want to say I take it for granted because I certainly don't, but like I don't necessarily consider myself to be like the font of all knowledge of this sort of stuff. It's just like yeah, like I've been fortunate enough to do this for almost 15 years now. So I
Mm.
guess I'm doing something right. But yeah, I'm by no means like the greatest either. So I think it's important to remember like to uh, stay humble, I guess, in a way, because like if you do let your head get to you, then I guess that's probably where you have issues. I don't know. It's probably not a very good answer to
No,
that
no, it's
question. To
exact.
be
It's
honest with
no, it's exactly what I was kind of looking for because I get, you know, I get people who a lot who are like 14 or 15, and everything seems to be out of reach. And basically, what I ask a lot of people is like, okay, when you're at this age, did you expect it? 9 times out of 10, it's no. And like the message you were saying about, yeah, you're continually learning, you're making your way through, and you know things happen in different ways and in different times.
you. Look,
So
I think
yeah.
if I look back at my career, like the irony is, and I've always kind of joked about this, like my professional life and my personal life are kind of two very different things. Like in my professional life, I like to be extremely organized. I like to keep a tight schedule. I like to plan. I like to kind of have all of that written down. In my personal life, like it's a complete mess. I have no idea what I'm doing on the weekend, and that's in like a day's time, right? Sort of thing. So, and like on the flip side, I've almost, I guess, I'm fortunate enough to have been good at my job to always have hit those, I guess, next career milestones or figure out how to hit those next career milestones. But like, it's not, I'm also not the sort of person who sits there and goes like, okay, in 15 years time, I want to be the CEO. So I need to, in 2 years time, hit like this level and 3 years time, hit this level. And then kind of be like, question mark, like I'll be CEO. For me, it's always been like, all right, where do you want to go next? And then like, what does next look like? How do you get there? And then kind of now that you're there, it's like, all right, now cool, like you've kind of ticked that goal off now, like now's what the next one is, if that makes sense. So
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's
yeah, I mean
fantastic.
that's really personal, like a personal thing, right? Like some people know from the day that they're 18 exactly what they want to do, and that's not to say that I don't know what I want to do. Like I have a vague idea, but I guess it's just like again, like I've been fortunate enough to jump around jobs in the video games industry, and I think it's important to kind of have that I guess experience in different disciplines. There's a really interesting theory. I'm not going to go too much into it, but basically around specialist or generalist. And I dare say I kind of walk a fine line between specialists in some areas and generalist overall. And yeah, I mean, definitely, it keeps you learning, it keeps you moving. I've never been to university, so that's something that I'm looking to do this year. I got accepted into an MBA, which as I probably in the same position that a lot of the kids that you work with are, like where they're about to go to university for the first time. Like I have no idea what to expect,
Yeah.
and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't quite nervous about it. But it's all kind of part of it, right? Like, and I think you don't like. Don't get me wrong. You don't need to be like a lot of the work that we do, you don't need to have a degree in. And in fact, like I know quite a few people in the industry who don't have degrees, at least to my knowledge, they don't. I don't want to name them because I don't want to get them wrong, but like they manage big brands. Like I think that's totally cool that they've gotten that far without it. So yeah, but I mean, again, there's also nothing wrong with doing
It's
that.
different
I mean, my motivation.
Yeah, it's different pathways.
No, absolutely. And I think the motivator for me is really around now that I'm kind of operating in a global market. Should I ever need to leave Singapore? And I really love Bungie. I think it's a great company, but like there are certain countries in the world that require you to have a degree to live in those or work in those countries. Like who knows where I'll be in kind of 20 years time, right? Like I would never want to be, you would never not want to get a job because you don't have a degree. But at the same time though, like I am very proud of the fact that the highest qualification I hold right now is a chainsaw license with New South Wales Forestries, which I got through
Awesome.
SES. So I qualified.
Fantastic. All right. Well, one thing I was going to ask you is also, games. What games are you playing lately?
Right now, I mean, I always played Destiny 2, and I think I'm very lucky in the fact that a lot of my best friends play it, and it's been a really great way for me to connect with people back home. But other than that, I've just started playing The Last of Us 2, which is, I guess, the game of the moment.
Yes.
What else have I been playing? I mean, COVID's been such a great excuse to just like binge video games, right? Funnily enough, at the very start of COVID, I started playing, what's it called? The motorcycle game with zombies on PlayStation, Days Gone. And that was really good. I really enjoyed that. I thought the way that they scaled the sense of threat from fighting one zombie to like 400 zombies was amazing. Like every encounter, no matter how many zombies it was, felt quite scary. What else? I've been playing a lot of Call of Duty Warzone. I think the way that Activision have pivoted that game to what I assume is going to be like a games as service title that will live for a number of years is like really exciting. I mean, I look at where it is now, and I remember going to the very first preview event for Call of Duty Modern Warfare back in, I want to say 2007, and like this was at Microsoft's head office in Sydney, and Activision were hosting it there, and that felt like a very special game that we all played. But I don't think any of the journalists, including myself, realized just how big a cultural phenomenon that would be. And I think it's so cool to see the evolution of that. And now that it's kind of entering into a games of service free-to-play space like that, that's really cool. Like, especially in Asia, the acceptance of free-to-play as a business model is completely the norm here, right? Like I go to internet cafes and I see people playing PUBG Mobile on Android emulators on PC. Like it's just like a completely different landscape over here. And I think there is a degree of, I don't want to, probably not snobbery is the right word, but people aren't as used to free-to-play games and games as a service in the West. But I think they're missing out. And I think a game like Call of Duty is, and Fortnite does a great job of this as well, is a really good way to kind of ease people into the way that these games operate.
Oh, yes, fascinating, mate. Fascinating. Okay, this is something I always ask everyone: is your favorite movie? What you're talking about binging before, but like what sort of movies you watch, or what is your favorite movie or TV show?
Yeah, look, I think probably before we get into that, there would be one thing that I would say, and I think I know that when everyone thinks of video games development as like hard coding and that sort of stuff, the beauty of video games development or video games industry that there is something in it for everybody. Like there are very few disciplines that aren't, like, at the end of the day, video games are a business. And if you aren't very good at coding and you might happen to still be really good at math, like maybe finance is a great way to enter this industry. There is like, we are like any other business. We have auxiliary like departments that support the hard development of games. So like, don't think of it as I have to be into coding to get into games. Like, I mean, I used to want to do that and then realize that I was absolutely garbage at coding. So I was just lucky enough to pivot. But like, think about the different ways you can get in, and if that's really what you want, like, don't stop chasing it. Get into those communities. I mean, if anything, like, now more than ever, people have unprecedented access to certain members of the games industry who put themselves out there, whether that be through Discord or through Twitter or other kind of social media platforms. So, like, feel free to ask them. And I mean, find people that you look up to, and I guess mimic and imitate what they do to kind of pick up their habits. Like, if you see someone who's really good at that, like, work out what they're really, like, what makes them really good at it. Like, I'm a big believer in that there are a few people who are naturally talented at stuff, and even the people who are naturally talented still put in the effort and put in the time. They might pick it up a little bit quicker, but that doesn't mean like you instantly pick it up and know like a coding language, right? Like, so don't be afraid to kind of find someone to look up to and kind of mimic their habits, like, and don't stop learning. Like, I've spent a lot of this year on kind of those personal development projects where I don't particularly enjoy reading business books, but it definitely kind of changes your mind on the way that you operate and the way that you prioritize your time and that sort of stuff. Like, that's how you grow and be a better person and hopefully be a better, like, I guess, I don't want to like, yeah, I guess employee. But to answer your question, like, what am I watching right now? Not really a lot. Like, I think, I don't know, like, I kind of come and go through TV shows. I really love Queer Eye. I think Queer Eye is a great example of a show that brings people together and kind of smashes down barriers, and it's a good bit of feel-good TV. I'm watching Better Call Saul, which I think like is superb cinematography. And finally, like, and I'll never stop being into this, like, my favorite movie of all time is Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Again, it's a movie that I think is very popular for a number of reasons. Like, it pioneered CG in movies. The puppeteering was still like amazing at the time. The storyline is great. I think the new movies do a terrible job of kind of continuing what the franchise is about. But yeah, no, I love it. So I just kind
it
of
definitely has a timeless quality. It's funny you watch it because they mix in with the CG with the puppeteering and everything else. And the lighting and everything, it still looks, it still looks like it was made yesterday. It has that look about it, as opposed to you watching something else that looks like, oh wow, that looks so 90s CGI.
Yeah, the CG holds up pretty well, and yeah, like, there's just so many. There's a great meme that went around a number of years ago. It was like, whatever year Jurassic World came out the same year as The Force Awakens, and it was like it was a meme of no, sorry, it was this. Yeah, apparently Star Wars and Jurassic Park movies have to come out on the same year. Whatever the last one was, Fallen Kingdom, and it was a meme around the fact that all of the Last Jedi fans were like arguing and kind of hitting each other with rocks, and then the bottom picture was like this Jurassic Park fans yelling dinosaurs, dinosaurs, like getting really excited about it. And like, don't get me wrong, I love dinosaurs and I think they're great, but like, a real part of the legacy of the Jurassic Park franchise is the fact that there's so many different caveats to it, like the history of that movie and the people behind it, like Stan Winston Studios, and obviously like amazing special effects studio. Like, it's I feel like, and this is going to be cliche, like, when they say they don't do it like that anymore, like, they really don't do it like that anymore.
No, and it's obvious.
Yeah, you look at Jurassic World, the first one, it had 20 seconds of actual puppeteering, and you could see it in the whole film. It's like, this isn't really as good. And then they kind of corrected that with Fallen Kingdom. They had a lot more puppeteering in it, which was great. It just kind of, they didn't really get the purpose of what Jurassic Park was about at that point, but at least they corrected the puppeteering and made it a little bit more realistic in that regard.
Well, that was really insightful, and I liked your whole thing that you were talking about, the advice you kind of gave about, life and getting into industries and that. So, on behalf of TGF, Tap Games Fest, Cause and Effect Gamers, New Game Plus TV, who's streaming this, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time, James. It's been wonderful speaking to you. It's good to see you again, and yeah, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, all the best. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm at Aussie Cozzy on Twitter as well. I'm always happy to have a yarn.
Yep. Fantastic, James. Thank you.
Thanks.